You know, when I was, I don't know, 10 or 12 years old, my father took me with him to vote. And I can remember that big machine. I couldn't even turn that handle to close the drapery behind us. But I was fascinated. I'm still fascinated. And I work as a poll worker for the Supervisor of Elections. So today I would like to introduce Craig Latimer, our Supervisor of Elections.
Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Several people have asked me what happened to my hand, and I said I'd make one announcement, and that was it. Bill Carlson twisted my arm to come to me. Actually, it's a little bit of a better story than that. I spent 35 years in law enforcement, and at some point I tore the ligament in my thumb, deteriorated. They tried to rebuild it once, and they went back in again, and now it's going to be solidly fixed because it's fused. So I'll still be able to wave. I've also been telling people that basically I had Tommy John surgery for election workers, and I'll be able to count ballots faster now. So yeah, what do? We got a couple big elections coming up this year, right? We've got 3 elections. March 19th is our presidential preference primary. That will be a Republican-only primary. And then we have our regular primary on August 20th, and then of course November 5th is the general election. I know this is an engaged group here, so I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about how to register to vote. But I do need to talk about reminding you to request your vote-by-mail ballot if you vote by mail. The legislature in 2022 wiped out every request that was on file, and now you have to furnish us with your driver's license number, Florida ID, or the last 4 of your social to get that. And it's only good through one general election cycle. Our voters got used to just checking that box on the back of the envelope, and that box isn't there anymore because we have to have that additional information. What else do we do? Well, you know, in addition to running elections, we also have to take care of candidates. Right now, we're actively working with over 40 candidates. We also got to go out and find the 240 polling sites that are all ADA accessible throughout the county for election day, and the 27 early vote sites. Getting all the equipment there is another logistical charm. As you can well imagine, we actually use a moving company to handle that. We coordinate all of it though. So I want to just talk a few minutes about elections and trusting elections. So by law, before every election, every county in this state is required to do what's called a public logic and accuracy test. What does that mean? We take a random sample of our tabulators that are used election day and early vote, and all of our high-speed scanners we use for vote by mail. We run what's called a test deck through those machines. We know what the outcome is. The logic is it can see every single space on that ballot where a vote can be cast, whether it's for a write-in candidate, for a referenda item, or for a candidate. It can see every single place where that vote can be cast. And the accuracy, of course, is do they count correctly? And they do. You know, we use optical scan technology that's been around for years and years and years, and these machines are highly efficient, effective, and accurate, I can assure you that. So after we do this public logic and accuracy test, by the way, the press comes, the public comes, candidates come, and watch this. The machines are locked down, sealed, and then they're put out into the community in open spaces for voting. After the election, everything comes back to our office. And again, this is every county in this state, by law, is required to conduct what's called a post-election audit. There's 2 ways you can do that. Your canvassing board can randomly select a race and precincts, and you go find all the ballots, early vote, election day, and vote by mail, and you have teams sit down and hand count those ballots. I can tell you that can be a chore, especially if they pick a countywide race and then pick a precinct that maybe had 8,000 or 10,000 voters in it. That's a lot of ballots to be trying to hand count. It's not unusual to say you need to count those again, you need to count those again, you need to count those again. The other way you can do it is with an electronic audit system that's certified by the state, and that's what we do. So we have a separate system, totally separate, and I'm required to put a minimum of 20% of the precinct ballots through this audit system. We put 100% through the audit system so that we can prove that every single ballot that was counted by our tabulator is also audited and verified by our audit system. So before the election, public logic and accuracy test. After the election, a post-election audit. How many people in here knew that? Raise your hand. How many people heard after the 2020 election, we should demand an audit, right? But thank you, I'm glad that you do know that. But the rest of you can now be a little bit of an ambassador for us, you know. Go out and talk to your friends and neighbors. This systems that we use are highly audited and balanced. You know, one of the things, I was having a conversation with somebody and they were talking about, oh, they're really worried about this vote by mail. And I said, okay, let's talk about that for a minute. Because again, every county in this state, when you request a vote by mail ballot, when I send it to you, I also send that information to the state and to the parties. When you cast that ballot, I send that information to the state and it goes to the parties. So where's all these other ballots? Because you can readily look at our reports and see how many ballots that we're reporting cast vote by mail and how many we mailed out and how many came back. So again, you know, just a tremendous amount of auditing. When you check in person to vote, you're signing in on an electronic poll book. We use iPads. So we know how many people have signed in at every polling site. We know how many people have cast ballots in there because we're able to count the ballots, obviously. So there's a tremendous amount that goes into this. I know PJ's a poll worker. Do I have any other poll workers here? Very good. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Any poll watchers? Okay, excellent. And is there anybody from the canvassing board here? I said that because one of the judges told me he was going to come today, so I don't see him here though. So, you know, and that's the other thing too, that everything that we do around the election is governed by our canvassing board. The canvassing board is made up of the chair of the county commission or their designee, a county court judge, and myself if I'm not on the ballot. If I'm on the ballot, then an alternate, usually another judge will be on there. And that's who oversees the entire election. So it's not a one-man show, I can assure you that. We also have a lot of transparency that goes into this. There's a tremendous amount of observation that can take place by members of the party that have been appointed by candidates so the party can come in. They can look over our shoulder as we do signature verification on vote-by-mail ballots. They can watch the duplication process to make sure that we're duplicating ballots in the correct manner. Why would we duplicate a ballot? Well, I can tell you the first and foremost one is that our overseas voters, our overseas military and civilians, we can mail, email, or fax them their ballot. They can only fax it back or mail it back. And a tremendous amount of them do fax those ballots back. We can't run those fax sheets through a tabulator. It has to go on a regular ballot, so that information would be duplicated to another ballot. We also, how many people in here vote by mail? Okay, do me a favor, when you sit down at your kitchen table, move your coffee out of the way, and your spaghetti, and whatever else you have there, okay? That's another reason we sometimes have to duplicate ballots, because they come in with, hopefully, food substances on them. And sometimes, you know, they might get slit while we're opening up the packages, and damaged in the mail, different things like that. So I want to talk, but I told you about the changes in vote by mail and making sure that you request that ballot each and every general election cycle. You have to do that. Additionally, there's been a lot of talk about drop boxes, right? In Florida, we don't have drop boxes at the corner of Florida and Kennedy, you know, on the street out there. The only place we're allowed to have, and they're actually called secure ballot intake stations, that's a fancy word for drop box. We're only allowed to have those during early voting hours at early voting sites, and then at my 5 offices. So if people don't trust the mail, I pay the return postage, which is pretty hefty. But if you want to drop it in person, you can drop it at those early vote sites or at my office at any time before 7 p.m. on election day. So let's, I'm ready to open it up for a few questions right now if you'd like. Hang on, he'll bring you a mic.
Where was that name?
is Andy Harris. I was a poll worker during the last presidential election here in Hillsborough County. With what the former president was doing to intimidate poll workers, with other activities to intimidate poll workers, how are you planning to protect poll workers here in Hillsborough County?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I mentioned before my previous experience in law enforcement, and we do coordinate with law enforcement very, very closely. I actually have law enforcement in my office on election day. They know where every polling site is. They know where every early vote site is, so they can rapidly respond if there's an issue. We also work with our poll workers and teach de-escalation techniques to them, to give them a little bit of guidance also. I think we're really lucky in this state, quite frankly. We don't have open carry, so we don't have people with long guns strapped across their chest. Yeah, thank you. But I will tell you that I'm a member of a national group called the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, and I've heard some absolute horror stories around the country. Bill Gates, who was a Maricopa County supervisor, they had to relocate his family. His wife was a juvenile court judge, and their daughter, they had to relocate him 2 days before the election because of credible threats against him. And there's been a lot of others too, where, you know, I was telling somebody earlier too, just this is kind of earth-shaking right here. I just found out the other day, somebody counted it up. Since 2020, 34 of my colleagues have left this profession. That's out of 67 counties, 34 have left. So, you know, those threats are real. We take them seriously. We talk to our poll workers about, you know, they've got cell phones, and don't call me and tell me that you think this guy might be acting a little strange. You should be calling 911 right then. So thank you for that.
Hi, Jerry from the Republican Party. Is it true that Mark Zuckerberg gave Hillsborough County, according to the Florida Policy Review of August 20th, 2021, $2.9 million? And also I have heard, I don't know if it's true, or I'm asking you face to face, there has been no accountability for what happened to this money. And if there is any kind of accountability, do we have access to it? And thank you.
Yeah, so the first question, reference to money. The money that we received came through an organization called the Center for Tech and Civic Life, CTCL. And it was, in fact, I know now it was money that the Zuckerbergs had pushed forward. We were actually urged by the Division of Elections to apply for these grants that were out there. And we did, along with, I think there was 14 or 15 other counties. Most importantly, though, so did the Republican Secretary of State that was appointed by Governor DeSantis, also took that money. So I don't know if that, you know, has any shape on anything, but yeah, we used it for a tremendous voter education program, and there's all kinds of accountability for it. You can certainly make a public records request, like probably 30 or 40 other people have, to our office, and we'll be more than happy to give you how much we spend on billboards, how much we spend on TV commercials, and I'll also add to you that we have the highest turnout in a pandemic that we've ever had in a presidential election. So I think the money is well spent.
Thank you, Craig, and Jerry and your team for excellent enlightenment. If a sitting president called you after an election and asked you to please find a way to find him or those, what would you tell him for the law, settle the subject?
We've already certified the election, and we've audited everything, and all the numbers count. So it's plain and simple. Thank you, Ron, for that. By the way, if y'all don't know, Ron's retired, but he still gets up in the morning and comes out everywhere.
Your work is inspiring. We are so fortunate to have you as our grown-up in charge of elections. So the question is, what does it take to be a poll worker? How could I volunteer to be a poll worker?
Yeah, excellent. Go to my website. I usually try and say that about 8 or 10 times. Go to my website, votehillsborough.gov. There's a tremendous amount of information on there. One of the things that I like to tell people, go on my website and look yourself up. Make sure that your name's spelled correctly, that you're at the correct address, and it'll also tell you if you've got a vote by mail ballot request on file with us. But most importantly, make sure you're registered in the correct party you think you're registered in. This is something that always surfaces during a presidential preference primary. People might be registered as a no party affiliation and think they're registered as a Republican, for example. Well, they're getting a ballot every time they go in there. They're getting a ballot because it doesn't matter if you're no party affiliation. You're going to get a ballot at the primary. Everybody gets the same ballot in the general. But then when they show up to vote in the presidential preference primary, they find out that they're not in the party they thought they were. So very important to check that. And February 20th, by the way, is the cutoff date to change parties or to register for the upcoming election. But when you go on my website, you can look for that button to be a poll worker. And there's some information you fill out there and it puts you in queue. You can also, I would really encourage y'all to sign up for our newsletter. It's an email, little 2-page newsletter, a quick read, but it's got a tremendous amount of information in it. And it's easily forwardable too, that you can enlighten your groups. It'll have all upcoming dates, just information you need to know. You can also look up where your early vote site is. I tell people all the time, I've got 27 early vote sites. It might surprise you to find out that there's an early vote site around the corner from where you're going to work or where you're dropping somebody off for school or something like that. So go to that website. There's also, one of the things that I try and tell people, go on there because we've got a whole series of videos on there that talks about exactly what to expect when you walk into a polling site. That's important for our first-time voters. We don't want people to be intimidated by the process. Thank you, Ben.
Good morning, Bill Johnson. There's people in Florida that are advocating ranked choice voting. The question for you is, do your systems have the capability or the option of counting ranked choice voting?
No. Plain and simple. And the legislature actually, I think, passed a law that forbids ranked choice voting right now. But the system's not capable of doing it right now. I think he's got one back there.
Good morning. We're not the president of the Downtown Partnership, but my question is as a mother of 3 teenage boys. I wouldn't dream of ever missing an election, and my kids seem to have no interest in voting. So can you give me a little bit of the inspirational message to pass on to them, please?
So, that's an interesting one, and we talk about that quite a bit because 18 to 25-year-olds in Hillsborough County make up the second largest block of voters, right? 18 to 25-year-olds. Only outdone by 60 and above, right? So you've got a 7-year time span there, and let's say a 20-year time span at least. But guess who votes the least? The 18 to 25-year-olds. So we try and work with groups however we can. It's like I kid about, I go to the University of South Florida, even though I am an alumni, and say, hey, you should register to vote. They're not going to listen to me. So we try and work with student government, to get the kids inspired out there. And they get creative. I know one year the student government called me and said they wanted to have a beer and ballots contest. And I was like, no, we can't do that. I'm not going to be involved in that. But I thought you were going to ask me about parenting skills, and I was going to pass on that totally. But yeah, I mean, you have to work with your kids to be civically engaged. Sometimes the light clicks, and sometimes it takes longer for the light to come on.
Hey, Craig, Diana here, publisher of 83 Degrees Media. Thank you for your service for one thing. It gives me comfort, and I think we have a lot of credibility in this county because of you, and I appreciate that. Second of all, presidential preference elections coming up. Can you tell us a little bit more about when that is, what the process is? Is it the same as any other election? Is there early voting? That sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you. So the presidential preference primary basically is put on by the parties. We just happen to be the conduit to send the invitations out, so to speak. Either the vote by mail ballot or the sample ballot. But this year it's only going to be a Republican presidential preference primary because the Democratic Party, their executive committee met and they moved Joe Biden forward. So there's nobody else on a ballot for Democrats here in the state of Florida. So it will only be for Republicans. And that's what I said, that February 20th is the last day to register to vote or to change your party affiliation if you want to vote in that presidential preference primary. And you can do that anytime, by the way. You can change your party 29 days before any election to do that. So yeah, there'll still be 2 weeks of early voting. I've already sent out overseas military and civilian ballots. They went out February the 2nd. We've already got ballots back in our office, so it's game on for us. But it'd be the same as any other election as far as the 2 weeks of early voting, and then of course election day will be on the 19th, on March 19th.
Hi, Dave Coleman, and your website also has an awful lot of information about candidate requirements. I learned that at a forum you were recently at. My question, though, is opinion of yours on the timing of this. Ken Hagan has passed agenda items to keep himself in office for the past 22 years. There are 2 Republican term limit bills quickly moving through Tallahassee. If one of them gets signed, do you think it will be in time to keep Hagan's name off the ballot?
I couldn't answer that, and truthfully with you. What I'll tell you is that never lose sight of the fact that election law is made by people elected to office.
Hi, so I think you guys have been doing a great job with, I was a poll watcher, and going to the polling locations, great transparency, and I think they're conducted well. My question was with the mail-in ballots, because they all go to one location. Do you have poll workers or poll watchers that can see that process as well when they come in? Because that's the only area that I'm aware of that there weren't on both sides, Democrat and Republican, poll watchers and poll workers, just seeing the process of how that they were counted.
Yeah, so number one, they don't all go to one location. They ultimately go to one location.
Okay.
But just like I was saying, for early voting, if you drop them off there, it's going to eventually come back to our main service center out on Falkenberg.
So when they get sent to the
Well,
poll,
and that can be intermittent. I mean, it happens at different times. And we do have, though, I mentioned before about that we have people from the parties and candidates that come in to watch signature verification. And many times when they come in to do that, the mail is actually coming in at the same time. But I go back to that accountability again for those ballots. Every single vote by mail ballot I send out, we notify, by law, we have to notify the state, and the state distributes that information to the parties. And I know that for a fact because when the parties come in, they'll have the voter ID number that they've gotten off of that transmittal from us to the state. They won't even have the person's name, they just have the number of the one they want to observe. But when that ballot's cast, come back to our office, that information again goes up to the state. So this goes to what I was discussing earlier, where I had this conversation with somebody who was convinced that people were stuffing ballots in the ballot box on the way back to my office. These spare ballots from somewhere.
No,
and they don't.
I was more trying to figure out the process of the mail-in, how they're accounted for.
So, yes, they all come to a central location. We've actually got a room about half this size that has our Blue Wave Reliavote equipment, something that you'd see in like a Visa card center. Because we do quite a bit of vote by mail and we do it all ourselves. We do the packages in and the packages out. So when that ballot comes back to our office, there's a barcode on that envelope. We run it through the machine, and at that point, it cancels the voter's ability to vote in person. All right. So it's coordinated with our voter registration system, and it also says, okay, that's an envelope that we sent out. We don't know what's in it yet because we haven't opened it. So it says that that's an envelope that we sent out. Okay, this is good. We're going to cancel this voter's ability now to vote in person. Now we're going to do the signature verification on these. And our people that do signature verification have to go through a state-approved handwriting analysis course and produce their certificate from that before they can even start looking at ballots. And we've got a process in place, or looking at envelopes, I should say. People do a good job. They don't sign like they do at the grocery store on the little pad there. They do a little bit better job than that. But you know what? If for some reason your signature doesn't match, there's a remedy for that. The legislature passed a law that you fill out an oath that says, yeah, that's me, that's my ballot, and you have to furnish us with a copy of one of the acceptable forms of identification, and then that will be accepted. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you for your service again. Thank you. I really appreciate it. In my small world, a number of my fellow Democrats are changing their party affiliation for the primary just so they can I vote for Nikki Haley. Now, I know how the vote hasn't happened yet, but are you finding, what's the statistics? Are you finding a lot of changes more this year than others?
I'm not, quite frankly. You know, we hear this all the time, and we do have a report we could look at that's called the Party Change tab or something like that. And it's really interesting. It's like a wash. You know, X amount of people will leave this party, X amount of people join this party, X amount of people left that party and joined this party. It just goes back and forth. It's really, like I said, it's kind of interesting. I've heard that also. I haven't seen any great influx of that.
Thank you. We're a little surprised that the Democratic Party, which is supposed to be for democracy, refuses to have a primary. But can you explain what do you do to verify and certify that no illegal or ineligible people in the entire county, you know, have slipped through the system and, you know, are able to vote? Thank you.
So when you register to vote in this state, you have to furnish a driver's license number, a Florida ID card, or the last 4 years social. And the state makes a match of that, usually through DMV. DMV knows whether people are citizens or not through their system too. Now, I will tell you that, yeah, it does happen occasionally. I tell you where I usually see it, it's kind of interesting. People will apply for citizenship, and it turns out they had registered to vote. Never voted, but they might have been registered by a third-party vendor or something that told them they could register, and they were registered, but they hadn't been voting. But, you know, I'm sure that it occurs in very small instances. And I can tell you one more importantly than that. If you get a summons for jury duty, I would suggest you don't check the box that says you're not a U.S. citizen, because then you're going to be getting a letter from me first, and then you may be hearing from law enforcement next. And that happens quite frequently, and it's just amazing. I need to look at that form, because apparently that box is real close to something else they meant to check every time. So, yeah.
Hi, Craig. Republicans used early voting for 20 years and been very successful, while Democrats, at least in Hillsborough, tended to vote in early voting as opposed to mail voting. Until Donald Trump came along and started raising questions about mail voting. Now that the legislature has made everybody request new ballots, new mail ballots, what do you see? Are Republicans still requesting early voting, mail ballots from Democrats, or not? What's the situation from a partisan standpoint? And then how are independents? Are they embracing mail voting?
We've been trying to really get a robust education program out there about requesting a vote-by-mail ballot again, and we're seeing it across the board. We're seeing it Democrats, Republicans, no party affiliation. It's like people that like to vote by mail, vote by mail. People that like to go to early vote. But as to your partisan comment, I will just remind you that there's politics in elections, and I run elections.
Hey, that was a great presentation. My name is Pete. I'm a young Democrat. Democrat, nonetheless. And
you're younger than me, okay?
You know, over the years, I've seen a lot of voter suppression from the other side. My first question is, do you have any ideas on how to prevent that, or any kind of volunteer opportunities to avoid that, or try to quell that? Second question point is there's a low voting turnout in this country. It's terrible. I think it's like 40% of people vote. So do you have any ideas on how to just get more people to vote?
Yeah, so I'll take that one first. I mentioned before about the 2020 election, we had the highest turnout, it was like 73, 74%, which is not unusual for a presidential year. We're always in the 70s. And I think it's even going to go higher this year because of the robust list maintenance program that we just completed. But as far as suppression, my job is to make sure that every person that's eligible to be registered to vote has that opportunity, and every registered voter has the opportunity to vote. Somebody asked me about, isn't it your job to get out and vote? It really isn't. I send the invitations out. I send a vote-by-mail ballot to you. I send a sample ballot to you. I tell you where you need to show up for the party. But at some point, the voters got to take some responsibility there too. And that's a job of candidates and parties and stuff to get the vote out. I'm certainly not going to be running around, the first thing happened, oh my God, Greg, you told 10 Democrats to get out and vote, but you didn't tell any Republicans to get out and vote. So we don't even go down that road.
Morning. Thank you for sharing with us the systems that you put in place to count the votes that everybody's voting. I'd love for you to speak on the fact that everything is electronic and how easy it is for nefarious people to exploit through like cyber attacks and things like that. A couple years ago, an 11-year-old boy hacked into Florida's voting machines in less than 10 minutes. So it's great that you have put all these things in place, but what are you doing to say after we've collected all the votes that people have physically handed us, that there's nothing that can intervene and sway things afterwards?
Thank you. Great question, too. So in addition to the safeguards that we have in place, our tabulation system, the management system, is in a standalone air-gapped system. It's not connected to the internet or the intranet in any way. It's a total standalone system. The only way we can pull it, to use that example of a nefarious person, they would have a lot of work they'd have to do to start looking at, how many jurisdictions to change things, and I don't know how they do that. As for the 11-year-old, I've seen those machines hacked in at Las Vegas, at DEFCON out there, but guess what? It doesn't happen in the polling site when the machine's sitting there in plain view for everybody to see that comes into the polling site. It's also got seals on it, it's got locks on it, and they're not given access to it. We don't have somebody coming in with a hoodie on going behind the machine. Every tabulator, and this is by law again, on election night when the clerk shuts the election down at 7 p.m. or when the last person's voted, the first thing they do is they produce 2 results tapes, the results of that machine. One of those is actually taped to the outside door to the polling room in plain view for the public to see. Anybody can go look at that. The rest of it comes back to my office. So, there's, again, we go back to a tremendous amount of accountability with these numbers, and they're out there in plain view for people to see. We also, we do the election night results, and those can be verified precinct by precinct with those tapes. And we have people that do that. I mean, I've got people that might be working a precinct for a certain candidate, and they want to see how'd it do for them. So they're standing there with bated breath waiting for us to come out there and tape that to the outside so they can see if their work paid off or not. They're taking pictures of it, and they've got that information. So, there's, again, just a tremendous amount of checks and balances. And this goes back to the audit also. Doing this post-election audit after everything has been done to verify, once again, that the tabulators counted the ballots correctly.
Okay, I'm wondering how you determine who will be on this year's Republican ballot, given that there have been other caucuses and primaries.
So, thank you, Jay. Good question. You'll notice that when these presidential candidates step aside, they suspend their campaign. They haven't withdrawn. Matter of fact, the date to officially withdraw was back in December. So if you're a Republican, your ballot is going to have all those candidates listed on it. And we will count and report those results. I remember 16 when Jeb Bush was on the ballot, and he got out the weekend before early voting for us. So all the vote by mail, had been sent out, a lot of them back, and people were calling and saying, hey, I need to come vote. My guy got out of the race. I'm like, well, it doesn't work that way. You don't get to come vote again. And that's why they just suspend their campaigns. They legitimately, they can get back in it at any point. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Clayton Clemens, and I represent a local foundation that supports young people with developmental disabilities. My question is actually stated, and it goes off of the engaging voters in that 1825 block. Engaging those people, I am just outside of that block, but I live with a 22-year-old, and I live with a 27-year-old, and I get about 15 videos sent to me a day from TikTok. So, just a suggestion for the Republican Party here, for the Young Democrats here, the Democratic Party here, and the Supervisor's Office, hosting some sort of competition with high school seniors or local university students to create a viral TikTok, rather than putting millions of dollars into billboards that they're not looking at because they're on their phones. Having a prize where they can create that viral TikTok might be a way to engage them. So just a thought.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. But we do a tremendous amount with the schools here too in Hillsborough County. We're in every high school at least twice a year pre-registering 16 and 17-year-olds. They're allowed to pre-register. They can't vote until they turn 18, but that gives us an opportunity to get out in front of them. Also, we have been doing art contests, and that really took off. We used to just have regular, kind of poster art type thing. And Jerry Kramer, my chief of communications over here, raise your hand, Jerry, wave there, good. Jerry came up with a brilliant idea of having elementary and middle school students develop and design I voted stickers and future voter stickers. So some of you taking your children with you to vote, they give them a little future voter sticker. Well, we got some really knockout ones now. I think we had 95 people that are students that had put in artwork for the last one that we did, and we've got one going right now again too. And we honor them at the school board meetings. We put their information out there, and it's just a great way to continue to try and engage with those students. But again, sometimes the light goes on, sometimes the light takes longer to go on.
Hi, this is the Democratic candidate for the office of public alert. Greg, I was wondering, when does tabulation begin for the early voting ballots that come to the office?
To vote by mail.
Yes.
Yes, we're really fortunate in this state. By law, we can begin processing and tabulating vote by mail ballots 22 days before the election, right? That's why election night, we come out to be the shining star in the country, because a little after 7, and the canvassing board says produce the results. The first thing we push out are all the vote by mail totals we have to that point, and all of the early votes that we've tabulated from the 2 weeks of early voting. So we're literally putting out probably 70% of the votes right after 7 o'clock. Some states, I think Pennsylvania, can't start counting their vote by mail until after 7 p.m. on election night, which is just, in the 2020 election, I think we had like 347,000 vote by mail ballots, and we were pumping 8 hours a day through the weekends to get those ballots tabulated. I can't imagine, trying to start doing that at 7 p.m. after the election.
I wonder what kind of trends you're seeing with election reform. I know some people in Australia, and I believe there it's just compulsory to vote and it's all by mail. Yeah, so, do you see any growing trends, or, I can't opine on what you personally think?
No, I think the elections have been front and center for the legislators for the last couple of years. We're seeing minor things that come out, like the additional information for the vote by mail. There's pushes out there to do like hand counting the ballots, which is absolutely crazy. I can't imagine, so-and-so does it. Yeah, they've only got one race on their ballot. We've got like 40 or 50 races on a 2-page ballot. I can't imagine how long it would take you to do that. I had a reporter come interview me because somebody floated a bill for that. And I handed him a ballot from, I think it was the 2018 election, and I said, will you count the number of races on here? He lost count at 13. It just, how many times you counted money and you had to recount it? I couldn't tell, right? And that's it. I saw an article out of Nevada. There was a small county, they had 352 ballots or something like that, and had a couple races on the ballot. And it took them 8 hours to count 352 ballots with just a couple races. And there was another study, I can't remember the number now, but it's outrageous. It took like 20 hours to count so many ballots. And hand counting is not the answer, I can assure you that. Nor is voting on one day. I don't want people standing in lines. That's why, I love the fact that we've got 3 methods of voting, and you pick the one that's best for you. We talk about plan your vote. I was laughing. somebody came, oh, you did, you came up to me, Sandy was telling me about, he goes to GM Platt, to vote, and early voting, and he goes down to Shillers, and something done, everybody else that was at GM Platt goes down to Shillers too. So, that's how you plan your vote. You could have gone to the ice cream place too. So yeah, we talk about that all the time. It's telling people, plan your vote. You know what you're going to do. Take somebody with you, my gosh. Like your kids. And you know, make it a festive event. Okay.
Good morning. A couple of questions about vote by mail. What are the rules on returning a vote by mail ballot on election day, in the general election? And then explain for us how it is you determine that I didn't go down and turn in my vote by mail ballot in the box and then run inside and vote.
And so, thank you for that. A couple things on that. Let's go back to that one first. So, when you request a vote by mail ballot and I send it to you, that shows in the voter registration file. So if you walk in to vote, 9 times out of 10, the person's going to say, you know, well, do you have your vote by mail ballot with you by any chance that we sent to you? Because we'd like to spoil that if that's the case. And you don't have to take it though, because it goes back to that. When you cast that in-person vote, it's going to stop that vote by mail from coming through our system. It's going to kick it out. It won't take it. That's probably first and foremost. I'm sorry, what was it? I did the last one first. What was your first question? Oh, yeah, thank you. So the ballots have to be in my office by 7 p.m. on election night. There's no, not postmarked by or anything else. They have to be in my office by 7 p.m. No, on election day, they've got no way to get that to my office by 7 p.m. They have to they won't take them at a polling site on election day, but you can surrender it right there and vote in person. Yes. Yeah. Sure can. Yeah, the system, and thank you for that. That was another good one. That goes with the one we were talking about, that it works both ways. When you get a vote by mail ballot, it's noted in our voter registration system. When you return that vote by mail ballot, it's noted in our voter registration system. If you get a vote by mail ballot and show up to vote in person, we know we're going to cancel your vote by mail ballot now. So the machine's going to spit it out if it happens to come through. Yes, sir.
Fred, I join the many others in thanking you for your continued commitment to public service, first in law enforcement, and now for supervisor elections. You answered earlier, and I will paraphrase, there are politics in elections, and then there's running an election. I run an election. But you're in a unique position to occasionally both run an election and be a candidate for re-election as supervisor of elections. I wondered if you could share with us the process of taking off one hat and having to put on the other hat, from going to the confident, competent, rational answers that you give us as our supervisor of elections, and then addressing the emotional motivation of voters.
Yeah, the only real difference there is I mentioned earlier that if I'm on the ballot, I can't sit on the canvassing board for that election. That there has to be a replacement, which that makes sense. I mean, and like I will take my my privilege away of actually being able to go into the tabulation room. I'll deactivate my card for that, and I'll have to have somebody with me to even go in there. So it's just trying to do the right thing. I've got 3 rules at the office: follow the law, give great customer service, and do the right thing no matter what the consequences are. Plain and simple.
Rosemary Henderson, and I thank you also for all you've done for our community. I know you've been in office over 10 years now. You've touched on this maybe, but if you could share maybe something about your job that's been more rewarding or more special than you thought it would be. And also, is there something that's been more frustrating to deal with or than you expected it to be? Thank you.
Well, thank God I'm a glass half full person. So I try to let things roll off my back. But after being in law enforcement for 35 years, I've learned a few things there. Just by way of that, I'll let you know, as many of you know, I spent most of my life in the homicide arena with the sheriff's office. I was a homicide detective, sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. I retired as a major. I developed the child protection investigation unit that transitioned from the state to the sheriff's office and now back to the state.
I've been around the block a couple times. This job has been very rewarding because it's a putting together logistical challenges, people challenges, and making sure that you've got a good plan in place. People will tell me, boy, I bet you're getting ready to get busy. No, we've been busy for over a year. Now we're just going to execute the plan. They'll say, boy, election day, I'll bet you it's just wall to wall for you. Not really. We've trained 2,500 poll workers. We got all the equipment out there. Everything's running just like we planned for it to run. I would tell you one of the highlights. My office was the first supervisor of elections in this state to achieve the Governor's Sterling Award. It's a prestigious award. It's not something they just hand out and give to you. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, may know about the Malcolm Baldrige Award for Performance Excellence. Exact same criteria, but on the state level. They send examiners into the office, talk to your employees, make sure your employees know what your mission, vision, and values are, and that you're doing exactly what you say you're going to do. We benchmark things. One of those is get results out. We're going to make sure we're getting results out in a timely manner. So we're constantly challenging ourselves to do that in a professional and efficient manner. So that's, to me, that was a huge thing. We're considered a role model because of that designation. And we do have numerous counties come to us to see how we're doing things. I got a great team. That's the whole bottom line to it, is I've been very fortunate to put together an extremely efficient professional team.
This is our last question.
Hi, good morning. I was a little late, so sorry if someone already asked this. I know there's a Senate bill and a House bill, and I think they were working on this week about adding the language for harassment against poll workers and poll watchers. How do you feel about that? Do you feel it's necessary? Because some of us feel like it could prevent people from wanting to volunteer or to work and be a poll watcher or poll worker for fear of unnecessary backlash.
I've heard that, not unnecessary backlash, but I think that, the spirit of the law is to keep people from harassing people that are trying to vote or trying to conduct elections. We did touch on that a little bit too. I talked about that, we've been fortunate in our area here that we haven't had any real incidents, not to say that they couldn't happen. One of the things I do on election day, I invite members from both parties into my office, so we've got a real efficient process that if there's something going on at a polling site, we can tell the party, hey, we're getting complaints on this poll watcher. How about getting a hold of them and tell them to calm down? And I've thrown poll watchers out of polling sites that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. We give our training to the parties because I want them to know what the poll workers are doing in there and why they're doing certain processes. I'm familiar with that. Matter of fact, when I leave here, I'm going to be on a phone call with our state association to talk about those bills a little bit. But I've heard both sides of that. With the poll watchers are afraid that the poll workers are going to say they were harassing them, and it's still got to be a law enforcement investigation and things. So I'm kind of back on that a little bit. I just don't think it's a real issue. But if I've got somebody that comes into the polling site and threatens to, do physical bodily harm to one of my poll workers and a poll watcher's there too, by God, they ought to be charged 2 times. So I don't have an issue with that.
Well, our release is run out over here. Thank you so much for coming together.
Thank you.
Great show. Great. Thank you. We'll see you all next week.